Good evening, welcome along to NUFC Matters. My name's Steve Wraith and joined as always by Supermac and Gibbo. How are you, lads?
Nice to see you, Stephen.
Indeed, lovely to see you, Steve, and you, John, indeed.
Yeah, it is, mate, it is.
Always plenty to talk about, lads, on NUFC Matters, as we found out through the course of this season. And let's start with something we've tried to avoid for the last few weeks, and that's the takeover. It's been in the news quite a bit this week, mainly because of the geopolitical struggle that seems to be going on between the Saudis and Qatar. Now, John, I know you're not a political reporter. You're a sports reporter, the best sports reporter in the UK, and certainly the best in Newcastle as well. Let's talk about what's gone on with, our football club. We've been dragged into this geopolitics and this Barney between these teams across in the Middle East. And it seems to me as if we've reached an end game on this now, because Dominic Raab yesterday came out and made a statement to say that the Saudis were now going to be trading once again with the UK, and that we will be selling arms to them again. Khashoggi's girlfriend, they call her the widow, but she never actually got married to him, so she's not a widow.
No.
Was on GMB, Good Morning Britain on ITV with Piers Morgan and Susanna Reid, and she was given some airtime to criticise the Newcastle United takeover. It seems very much as if we've been dragged into this, but I've said this from the start. This has got nothing to do with our football club takeover, really, has it, John?
No. I mean, the whole thing's quite staggering. It could only happen to Newcastle, couldn't it? We couldn't have a straightforward takeover from Mike Ashley. It has to be a complicated one. That's the way Newcastle United are. And quite frankly, you get to the situation where you think, what is there left to be sorted? And the only answer is the one I keep coming back to, is that slowly but surely they're trying to wring everything they can out of the Saudis on the piracy before it is said, right, you can now go ahead. I can't see in lots of ways how they can't give it the green light eventually, because the government quite readily do a lot of business with the Saudis. There's not a situation where you're wondering if the money's going to be there, or if anything's going to happen like it's just happened to Wigan. You're not looking at those sort of circumstances at Newcastle. So I find it very difficult to know, outside of the piracy thing, what they're going to do to stop it all happening. And I think it will happen. But the staggering thing is, we're running out of time, Steve. We talk about, with this season going on into July, till the end of July as it is now, and it's likely to be starting the next season around September the 12th, it doesn't leave an awful lot of time for, if a takeover happens, for anything to be put in place regarding transfers or backroom staff, or it would mean things happening pretty quickly. And for that reason, I'm pretty certain, like it or not, that Steve Bruce will be in charge on September the 12th, even with the takeover having happened. Because can you turn it round that quickly? Do you want to turn it round that quickly? Unless the manager is out there with a deal already done, waiting to move in, the answer would be no. And I suspect we'll start the new season, and I'm emphasising start as opposed to finish, the new season with Steve. But I'm only desperate to emphasise that we don't start the new season with Mike Ashley. That is the terrifying thought to end all thoughts.
Well, has it surprised you, the length of time this has taken? I mean, takeovers, as we know and we've discussed on this show, aren't played out in the public usually, but this one has been very, very public. Although neither side, the buyer or the seller, has made any comment due to the non-disclosures that they've signed. Has it surprised the length of time it's taken? And do you think it's literally just down to the fact that it is Saudi Arabia?
I'm not surprised that the amount of time it's taken, because apart from there's been a huge amount of negativity around it. There are all sorts of different bodies who are very opposed to this situation developing. And at the same time, with the lockdown, the football authorities, they've had lots of other things on their mind, like getting the season finished and getting the new season started pretty much on time. So all deals such as Newcastle United have been put to one side, and they'll get around to it in time, but they're not going to rush it, I don't think. And it's a good excuse to let all the hoo-ha die down.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the other thing, John, I mentioned to you before we came on air was that had this been a regular season and, we got to that stage where Newcastle were in the quarter-final of the Cup, but they weren't safe from the relegation battle as they weren't when we started Project Restart, would we have all been clamouring for a takeover then? Because it probably would have unsettled the team. It would have unsettled Steve Bruce, the uncertainty as to whether he had a job. So does it not make more sense that this takeover goes through when the season finishes at the end of July?
It makes more sense, Steve, in terms of a clean break and starting again. That would be the perfect timing, if you like. But I don't think the Premier League are concerned one jot about what will be perfect for Newcastle United and the fans. I think they're just going about their own business. And while I agree with Malcolm on the fact that there's been other things going on for the Premier League, I think as well, this is about as complicated a deal as they've ever had in front of them, bearing in mind people getting on their hind legs about human rights as well as the piracy thing. And the piracy thing's worth millions of pounds, and they're not going to take that very lightly. And they see this, I think, as the only chance to get this sorted, because the Saudis have to play ball if they want this club. So this is the one and only chance. If they let the Saudis in now and it's not sorted and guaranteed, not just word of mouth, then they've lost the opportunity completely. And of course, we've got to remember that it was a very different case, but it took Southampton's takeover longer than we've had so far for its completion. When it is confused, they will go at their own pace, and we've just got to get on with it. Maybe Ashley's chuntering for his money. Maybe the Geordies are chuntering for their club to be returned to normality after 13 years, but that's not the problem of the Premier League, and I don't think they're bothered about that. They will make their decision when they believe that all the cans are in a row and they've got what they want out of the deal, then they'll say yes to it. And if they don't get what they want, the fear is that they won't say yes to it, of course. But we don't want to go down that road. We want to believe that it can still happen. And the Saudis obviously believe it can still happen because they're still hanging in there. As you rightly said, Steve, the thing that's been confusing for us all is the fact that because of the confidentiality clause, neither side can comment. They legally can't comment. Either the Saudis, Amanda, or the Rubens can't comment on that side. The Premier League can't comment on the other side. And Ashley can't get on his hind legs and start chanting about it because legally they're not allowed to. So that leaves a huge void. And when you think of how much the Geordie public want to know about this and want to know what stage it's at and when it'll be completed, the demand for and thirst for knowledge has been massive. And each day, everybody has had a pop at what they think the conclusion will be, when the bottom line is there's not one solitary single soul outside of that room that the Premier League in that actually knows when this will be completed or when it won't be and what stage it's at. We don't know. We speculate. We get a lot of nods and card markings from the parties concerned, but only that. Nobody knows for certain how long the piece of string is.
Malcolm, do you think once they get the announcement, the buyers and the sellers, do you think that there'll be an announcement straight away, or do you think they'll hang fire until they've got everything sorted, and if there's a new manager going to come in, that they'll want to do everything in succession? You would imagine they'll want to be organised and get off to a good start, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. I mean, I think the actual announcement, the normal way of the announcement is that it happens when the buyer's money goes into the bank of the seller. And once it hits the bank of the seller, then the football club will make an announcement saying that the thing is now completed. And then you would look for rapid goodwill gestures to come at a rapid rate of knots on top of that about any new signings, about what they'll do with the stadium, what they'll do with fan involvement, etc., to come rapidly after that to create a goodwill feeling. But first and foremost, you've got to get the thing announced, and I think that'll happen when the money hits Ashley's bank. That is the normal time for any takeover to be announced.
Absolutely, and at the same time, as soon as the money hits the bank, they're going to have to bring in an administration team to take over all the running of the club, which is hugely complicated. Plus, even more complicated with the current situation that we have. It's going to be a rush from one season into the next. There's not going to really be a closed season now. That was happened in the lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're going to want to get the whole thing absolutely tied down and organised and ready to go for the first kick-off of next season.
But that's why there's been talk, I think, Malcolm, that while Lee Charnley is going to leave the club, and he's accepted that, and it's virtually common knowledge, that would happen immediately. He may well sit in there, as the manager would, etc., for the start of the new season, for the transition to then, although the strings will be getting pulled totally by the consortium, but there may be a need for an overlap, like there is with many of these things, to make it smooth. Because it would be very difficult from day one to bring in a whole director of football, new managing director, any new coaches, manager, as well as new players, which must happen, of course. So there's got to be a transition period, and I think there will be. In this, it's going to be even tougher because, as we've both said, the small window between the end of this season and the start of next, it doesn't leave much room for much to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Moving on from the takeover, we'll watch that, of course, with interest over the next few weeks. I'm sure we will come to some kind of end game. A lot of stuff in the Chronicle, John, about Steve Bruce, of course, and I've seen it in the national press as well that a lot of people should owe him an apology and he needs to be praised. I put a thing out on social media, John, to say, yeah, well done, Steve Bruce. You did prove us wrong. You weren't my choice as a Newcastle fan, as manager. But you've kept Newcastle United up. You got us to a quarter final. Football hasn't been great, but you've done better than I thought you would. So, what's your thoughts on that, John? Do you feel that we should be patting Steve Bruce on the back and saying job well done?
I think we've got to say a massive thank you. Of that, there's absolutely no question. And because I think 9/10 of Newcastle fans feared the worst on the day that it was confirmed Rafa had left and Steve Bruce was coming in, because not only his Premier League record, but he was tainted by the fact that he was obviously Ashley's choice. He's done terrific under the circumstances, and the circumstances being the reign of Mike Ashley. There's absolutely no question about that. And I just find it awfully sad that we are thrilled for our club to avoid relegation and to avoid being in the bottom three at the end of a season. A club Newcastle size with 52,000 following, while we have Sheffield United way up in the top half of the table, while we have Leicester City in the top four, etc., and we are hanging the bunting out for being currently 13th or whatever it is. It is a terrific effort by Steve Bruce, and I'm thanking him very, very much for that. But we as a club have got to be allowed to dream bigger than that. There is absolutely no reason why we can't be a Leicester City, a Wolves, or a Sheffield United. No reason whatsoever. In fact, we should be them or better than that.
Yeah.
And we haven't been. And you know, the worry for me, lads, is that we will get to the stage, if we're not careful, where we are grateful season after season after season not to go down. We've got to have more going for us than that. And that is not down to Steve Bruce. He's done his job after being trussed up like Houdini and thrown in the time. It takes a change of ownership to change that. But if we aren't careful, we are going to end up being grateful for the seasons when we don't go down, having gone down twice under Ashley.
Yeah, Malcolm, what's your thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking there as John was speaking, that I remember when I first joined Newcastle United, and a number of the players said, "Never thought you'd come to the Northeast. You're a Londoner." And how the game has changed. These days, anybody moves anywhere if the money's right. You might hear the odd time when a player, he wants to be in London, but otherwise there is such a general movement within the game, and so for me, if the new people come in and are really going to put effort and finance into it, there is no reason why this club cannot do a Manchester City and be challenging right up the top. There is no reason why not. I remember Mike Ashley saying, if I were to spend £1 billion on looking to get to the top of the division, there will be somebody who will go and spend £1 billion and more. And so he was making it sound as if that £500 million that he was spending would be wasted. Well, and I thought that was such a short outlook. You know, we've got to look bigger and further than everything that's happened under Mike Ashley. I think it's all been very self-serving.
It's not worth living and taking part, Malcolm. If you can't dream,
yeah,
what's the point in taking part?
Sure, and you want to see people going out and looking to make the dream come true.
I mean, Leicester City.
None of that under Ashley. None of it.
Leicester City, we can say, yes, it was a fluke. It was one-off. It'll not happen again in another million years, them winning the Premier League title. But they've shown it's not that much of a fluke, because here they are now again in the top four in the Leicester City. They're again up there around about. Wolves spent an eternity in the Championship. They've got a good manager and a clever recruitment programme of good foreign players, and they've overtaken us and charged off into the distance. Sheffield United last season were in the Championship, and all right, we've beat them home and away this season, which is terrific, but they're still up there, and there's no reason why Newcastle can't be up there. I've said it in the past. They got up there by a fluke when we finished 5th. Not so long ago when Pardew was here. We got up there by fluke. We were 13th or whatever the season, and we went back to that the following season because we didn't build on it. Ashley had a real opportunity then when we finished 5th, got into Europe to say, right, this is going to be a springboard. We bought one player that summer, Anita, and the chance was gone. There is no reason whatsoever when we look, I'm not talking about knocking next season, Liverpool or Manchester City off their perch, but we cannot compete with Leicester. We can't compete with Sheffield United, and we can't compete with Wolves. I'm sorry, if we don't have that ambition with 52,000 in St James's Park, what can we have?
Yeah, good point. Moving on to our centre.
Can I just take John's point a bit further? because I was quite intrigued to see that the guy who is intending to come in and run Newcastle United, and I presume as the chairman, it was interesting to see the company that he runs. When he took charge of it just a few short years ago, when he took charge, their turnover was $750 million. It's now $2.5 billion. That's one hell of an increase that he's put in. And I just think, well, if he was able to do it there, if he can do that kind of form within Newcastle United and St James Park, then the world it could be the club's oyster.
I can see a lot of good coming from this takeover. I know that the emphasis has been on the Saudi and the PIF involvement, because obviously they're going to be 80% shareholders. But people tend to forget, and the media tend to forget, that Amanda Staveley, who was involved in facilitating the deal at Man City, is also involved along with her husband, as are the Reuben brothers, and they are looking at a 10% share themselves. Now, one would imagine that, when the football club is taken over, that their involvement is going to be on the British side of it, on the Newcastle side of it. You would imagine that they'll be the ones, who form part of the board. So, I'm not 100% sure we'll see, a Saudi representative as chairman, Malcolm. I think we could possibly see, who would argue with possibly even seeing Amanda Staveley take over. We've got Karen Brady at West Ham. Maybe to see Amanda Staveley as the chairperson at Newcastle would be a refreshing change. It would certainly be a lot more enjoyable than seeing Mike Ashley, as our owner sitting in the dugout, sitting in the stands. But I think there's a lot which we might be surprised about when this takeover goes through. But I just think there's been so much emphasis on the Saudi thing. And I think that's what's made it very difficult for Newcastle fans, certainly on social media. I know you're on Twitter, Malcolm, but you're not as prevalent and as active. John, of course, isn't. But there's so much going on there, John, which is it's nasty. It's politically motivated. There are accounts that are run by different organizations representing different companies and different people, and there is a lot of geopolitics going on Twitter, and that's what's dragging Newcastle United fans down and dragging Newcastle United fans into something that a lot of us, it's got to be said, don't really understand.
That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true, and that is one of the things that concerns me about this dragging on, because it allows people to have platforms to beat Newcastle United over the head when they may be talking about the Saudis or whatever, but it also beats Newcastle United over the head. And the longer this goes on, the more opportunity there is of a bandwagon passing and loads of people jumping onto it, which is why we need a solution pretty darn quickly.
Piers Morgan's an Arsenal fan. Of course, he's not going to want to see Newcastle United's takeover go through, because it means his beloved Arsenal is going to be, fallen by the wayside and fallen even further behind another football club, as opposed to the other clubs that have fell behind in recent times. So there's lots of people got agendas, lots of people got reasons why they don't want it to go through. We've talked about Richard Keys on here, who again has been very, very proactive against this takeover, and again, it's the Qatari connection with people like
he has an agenda. He has an agenda without a shadow of doubt.
It's been sad. It's been a very emotional time for Newcastle fans, more so because they're locked down as well and stuck in the house, and everyone's having to deal with COVID. Some people will have lost people, other people will have lost their jobs. So to have this takeover going on at this time has been another killer blow for a lot of Newcastle fans. So I agree with John. Let's hope it comes to an end. Let's move on to the football side of things. Of course, had his press conference yesterday for today's game. some of the things I picked out. I know I would like to talk about Joelinton again because it's a subject matter which is discussed amongst Newcastle fans. But let's talk about Andy Carroll. Andy Carroll went on to TalkSport yesterday, and just to give you a little highlight of what he actually said, John and Malcolm, was he knocked on the door. He's only made 19 appearances for Newcastle this season since his free transfer move from West Ham. But he wants to be starting more games, he said. So he's knocked on Steve Bruce's door a few times. He said he hasn't gone in for a row. He said he can sit there and have lunch with him and have a joke with him. He's just been in his office, but he's just told him that he just wants to play. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, Steve Bruce has decided that Joelinton is a better bet, or is he fitter? I don't know. You tell me, lads. John, what's your view on that?
Well, I think the problem with Andy Carroll, bless him, when you say he's made 19 appearances, that isn't starts. Some of those have been 10 minutes sub-appearances, haven't they? Which is very, very different. I mean, Steve Bruce and Andy Carroll and all the Newcastle fans would love Andy Carroll to be able to play regularly for Newcastle and be available to Newcastle, etc., etc., etc. The bottom line is, sadly, he isn't and cannot be. A lot of years ago, we had this with Kieran Dyer, who had injury upon injury upon injury, and his appearances got less and less. And I felt sorry for that lad. I feel sorry for Andy Carroll because he's been a battering ram of a player. He's just on the wrong side of 30, but he would normally have a lot of years left in front of him. He's not capable. He may want to start games. He may knock on Steve Bruce's door, but he's not capable of starting games. At the time he's coming out and announcing on TalkSport that he's desperate to play, etc., etc., Steve Bruce is sitting up here having his press conference for Manchester City and saying that Andy Carroll's got a groin strain and is therefore not available to be thought of for this evening. How many times have we seen Andy, bless him, in 2020? Never mind the 3 months when there was no game. How often has he started a game in 2020? He is a walking sick note, and it's a great tragedy, none more so than for the lad himself. But, his argument goes out the window when he's shouting about knocking on the door and demanding to start at the same time as he's supposedly got yet another injury with tonight's game coming up. It is a tough old time, and I'm rather surprised that he was offered another year's contract, to be brutally truthful, because he's not starting enough. And yes, he's not on big money, but he's on 20 grand, 30 grand a week, what return are we getting for that? He's taken one of the centre-forward shirts, of which there's 4, and nobody in the 4 scoring goals, so we've got to be allowing, there's neither Joelinton, Andy Carroll, Muto, or Gale, because that's his first 2 Premier League goals, that are scoring a pile of goals, but yet shirts are being taken up, and really we've got to free up some shirts and free up some positions and get somebody in that's going to score goals for us.
Yeah, sadly we've lost Malcolm. I will try to get him back, but in the meantime,
he might have gone into training so that he can play centre forward and score those goals for us. He's off doing a session.
Obviously, Steve Bruce came out at his press conference and he praised Andy Carroll, said that he's been a vital part of the squad, what he's done in the changing rooms, etc., as well as his involvement day to day in the in the squad has been much valued, and he's proved his critics wrong. I've got to be honest, I am with you, John. I feel that saying that he's proved his critics wrong is incorrect, because for me, you buy somebody like Andy Carroll to score goals and he hasn't scored goals.
Yeah, it is. It's harsh, and I don't want to sound as if I'm always on Andy's case, because he was a terrific battering ram, and when he was here the first time as a kid, and a handful as a centre forward. Anybody would want somebody like that. But because of his injury record, he hasn't gotten the double figures since he left Newcastle United. He hasn't gone to double figures for a league season since he left Newcastle United. And, you know, if he's not scoring goals, what's happened to Muto, by the way? We see him as much as we see Carroll, and he's presumably fit. So there's a centre-forward not scoring goals. We know about Joelinton's problems, and we're not certain what the future holds for Dwight Gale. He's done well with 2 and 2. Right now, but you know, is he going to have a future next season with Newcastle? They've got 4 strikers, and the most goals one of them has got in the league, not in the cups, in the league, which is our bread and butter, is 2 goals for Gale and 2 goals for Joelinton off a centre forward. It's quite amazing. I mean, the battle this season for top scorer, which I found very interesting, Steve, and particularly the West Ham game, 2-2, Almiron scores and Shelby scores. Now, the interesting thing is they're the 2 that are vying to be Newcastle's top scorer this season. Overall, Almiron's a top scorer with 8 goals, but 4 of them were in the cup. So he's only got 4 in the league, but he's our top scorer overall with 8. As a result of scoring against West Ham, and Shelby's our top scorer in the Premier League with 6. Now, that's a terrific return for Shelby because that's not his job, and he often standing on the toes of the centre-halves, pinging the ball around. And Almiron, who couldn't hit a Bondo for the first year here, is suddenly scoring some goals, and that's nice to see. But where's the orthodox, through-the-middle strikers of the 4 we've got, who are weighing in with a lot of goals for us? It's not happening. And if all those 4 end up staying next season, and they've all got contracts at this moment to stay next season, Steve, they're all on contract for next season, what do? We've got to get somebody out because we've got to get somebody in. At least one. We need 2 strikers, really. We really, really do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a question I can ask you and know I'll get an honest answer. Is Joelinton getting any better, or is he getting worse?
Well, the second part of the question's a goodie. He ain't getting any better, that's for certain. And again, you feel awful because I always seem to be banging the drum against Andy Carroll and against Joelinton, when in fact, as people, I'm not at all. I'm giving an honest opinion of the 2 players. And in Joelinton's case, he's not a striker that'll score a pile of goals. I'm not certain what we saw in him for 40 million and what made us think he was an out and out through the middle centre forward, because he's not, and he looks much more comfortable without being a great player when he's playing on the left-hand side and cutting in from the left-hand side. But he ain't a goal scorer. He will never be a goal scorer, and no, he isn't showing signs of improvement. I thought playing without the crowd there to get on his back, he could well blossom. In fact, I don't think that he has blossomed whatsoever. The only thing you can hope desperately for, and we're clutching at straws, is that a second season produces a bit more out of him, in as much as a second season has produced a bit more in terms of goals out of Almiron.
Yeah, I mean, Almiron has been a different player. I mean, he was coming into his own at the back end of last season, of course, with Rondon and Perez, you know, in running. But, I mean, he's been a breath of fresh air, hasn't he, really, this season?
And I think one of the reasons, Steve, is because he's now playing as a 10. And I think he can affect the game more from his central role just behind your main striker than he can when he's playing way out wide on either side, because he's going up and down like a winger. He's getting back. He was getting back and tackling their winger on the edge of our penalty area at times when he was played out wide. And he is much more effective with his pace and with his close control playing as a 10 than he was when he played out wide. And I think he's benefited an awful lot from that, and good on him. We've needed that. And of course, Sam Maximum on the, is coming wide and looks a hell of a prospect when you think he's only 23. So those 2 boys have given us a genuine lift. If we could get a 15-goal centre forward to go with those 2, we might start looking at the right end of the table, or being comfortable in mid-table from the off, instead of fighting at the bottom and then going into a rounds of wild applause when we get somewhere up to halfway in the table before the season ends.
The Mail was announcing this week that Tom Allen and Jack Young, both two youngsters, have been added to the squad for tonight's trip to Manchester City. Allen, of course, made his senior bow from the bench during the FA Cup third-round replay against Rochdale at St James's Park earlier this year. Young Jack, has failed to hit the first team yet. I mean, are you pleased to see those two lads announced to the squad? And would you like to see them get a run out? I mean, in the remaining games now that Newcastle's free from the spectre of relegation.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to see kids come through. There's no question about that. Our own kids. What we have in depth, a lot of us don't know because we haven't seen enough of them outside of the Longstaffs, of course. And we've always had kids where we've hung our hat on them, haven't we, in recent times, and said these are going to be terrific kids. And then somehow they've faded away. I'm thinking of Adam Armstrong. I'm thinking of Rolando Aarons, who, were given a huge build-up and then haven't quite done it. It would be wonderful if these kids get in and show something. But I think what is also interesting and what Newcastle have got to do, Steve, in these remaining few games that's left, decisions have got to be made very shortly on the senior players who are currently on loan, Lazaro, Bentaleb and Rose, as to whether we try to buy them or not. At this given moment, we don't know. I mean, Rose has gone out of the team recently, completely. Might well get a chance tonight. I would hope Lazaro gets a chance tonight because he showed against Bournemouth when he come on with his cameo, when he scored a super goal and then struck the bar, if you remember, for that awful miss of Hayden off the bar. He shows he's got perhaps something about him, but a decision's got to be made on those three, and it's very easy to send anybody back and say we won't bother, but if you've missed out and you later on you look foolish. So I want to see kids given a chance, but I also want these three to be able to make a decision which we believe is the right decision on whether we go and pay for them or not, because it costs a few quid to get these guys. Are these the right guys? Are these what we need? None of them's a centre forward, of course. Are they what we really need or no? And that decision will have to be made by someone, Steve Bruce or whoever, in 5 games' time.
Yeah. There's been you've mentioned the players, like Lazaro, Bentaleb, etc. But Emil Kraft obviously came in and didn't really hit the ground running. He's had a chance to shine over the last couple of games. What have you made of him, John?
I think he's done a lot better, but blimey, there was plenty of room for improvement from what we initially saw. There's absolutely no question about that. And I think one of the reasons, like I was talking, Steve, about how a change of position has helped Almiron by becoming a 10, I believe with Kraft, he has benefited hugely by flattening the back four out into a back four instead of him being a wing back, having to bomb up and down the pitch. He is much better as a natural right back in a back four. His emergence in Manquillo, who has played on the left but is really a right back, getting a 4-year contract, it's rather interesting what happens to DeAndre Yedlin now, isn't it? Where's he in the pecking order going to be as this season ends? Because in a way, a 5 suits him, because he can bomb up and down, where a flat back four, he's not a great defender of the ball, and he at times very naive, getting on the wrong side of his winger, etc., etc. So I would want to see more of Kraft before mine's made up, but he's certainly jumped at his opportunity, which surprised a lot of people. We were surprised when he came into the side and Manquillo was moved across. But let us see a bit more of him. He might, if he starts tonight, in a 4, or heaven forbid in a back 5, because Steve Bruce may go back to that because it's Man City, despite what happened in the first half of the FA Cup. It'll be interesting to see how against clever players Kraft deals with that over an hour and a half.
News coming in about the substitutions rule was interesting as well, John, that the Premier League are looking as if they're going to keep the 5 substitutions rule for next season. Do you think that's a good thing?
I think, yes, I do, because yes, it was brought in because it was a summer and because players were unfit, because they'd had only a short time. But it's all freshened up games, hasn't it? Second halves don't tail off like they used to tail off. With all the changes that can be made, it's freshened up games without a shadow of doubt. Of course, there's always somebody going to moan, and some of the smaller clubs that say we haven't got the bigger squads, whether that's Norwich or Bournemouth, with their sort of saying we can't compete with the 5 sub things. Well, if you're in the Premier League, you ought to be able to. And Newcastle tonight might struggle with 5 subs in terms of not having Almiron, not having Maximum, not having Hayden, not having Sean Longstaff, not having Andy Carroll probably. They are down on numbers. But I like it. It's freshened up matches. It really has been a little bit of an extra plus, and I would be quite happy to go along with that.
Players, not surprisingly, St Maximin and Almiron in particular, are getting linked with moves away. PSG allegedly sniffing around St Maximin, Atletico Madrid sniffing around Almiron, which his dad's been quick to reject in the Evening Chronicle. So what's your views, John, on those two? Do you think Newcastle can keep a hold of them?
Well, I think they've got to keep a hold of them, Steve. If we want to build anything at this club, we've got to stop being a selling club, which is, if we went way back, we famously sold Waddle, Beardsley and Gascoigne all within about 18 months and got relegated. We sold Andy Carroll, although that was a very good deal to get 36 million off Liverpool for Andy. Was a terrific. But Wijnaldum went there. We have tended to be a selling club, when we like it or not. Newcastle can't be that. If we're going to look towards the top of the table, if we're going to look to do what Leicester do, who kept Vardy and kept other people, and if we're going to do what Wolves do, then we've got to not only keep Almiron and Maximum, but build on them with other players like that. We've got to hold on to them. And perhaps the best chance of doing that is a new owner, because we know that if enough lollies put down to Ashley, he takes money.
He loves taking money. Let's look ahead to tonight's game. The Manchester City away. Not usually a happy hunting ground at the best of times for Newcastle. You've already mentioned that we've got a whole host of injuries for tonight's game. People queuing up for Derek Wright and the lads in the room. Steve Bruce has expressed doubts about Lascelles, Almiron, St Maximin and Andy Carroll for tonight. It looks potentially as if you might get a chance to see Muto. Atsu was certainly fit enough.
Stop threatening me. Stop threatening me.
Isaac Hayden, Sean Longstaff and Florian Lejeune and Kieran Clark were all unavailable. So yeah, it's going to be a different team. And Steve Bruce has already come out and said that it's highly likely that he will switch back to a more defensive formation tonight. So yeah, is it damage limitation tonight, John?
It almost is. I mean, I don't want it to be, but it almost is. I think that apart from the genuine injuries we have got, like Hayden and like Sean Longstaff, etc. I think this game was always earmarked to give a rest to Maximum, who hasn't had a rest since the restart of this season and has been playing weekend, midweek, weekend, all the way through. He looks ready for a rest. I think Almiron is ready for a rest as well. And I think, you were going to play them against West Ham, weren't you, to try to get a result, leave it here, and then play them against Watford at the weekend when you try to get a result. So I think this has already been earmarked for people like that to get a rest. And I think he will go back to a back five, because he look for some damage limitation, because at least in the league a 2-0 defeat is better than a 5-0 defeat because of goal difference, whereas in the Cup, you can lose 1-0 or you can lose 6-0 and it's all the same. I was hugely disappointed in the way we went about the FA Cup tie. I couldn't believe the first half of that game. Yes, I think he'll probably go back to a 5 at the back if he can, if Lascelles does it, if Lascelles makes it, to go with Shaw and Ferdinand. But all I can see is damage limitation. I cannot see us beating Man City. Yes, they've lost a few this season, and they lost the last game at Southampton. But on any other day, Southampton would have got back at 6. They put the shutters up and managed to get away with a victory. And I think that it'll be tough tonight. I just hope that we'll go about it when it's on telly in some sort of way that lets us retain our pride.
Yeah, John. When Newcastle played Man City last, what they did was they played 5. They played 5 at the back, and the 5, instead of getting tight, they kept dropping off. And in the end, they were playing across the edge of the 6-yard box. The midfield was dragged back to the edge of the 18-yard box, and left Andy Carroll up front, completely isolated, surrounded by 3 or 4 defenders. What Southampton did in getting the victory against Man City was they played 4 at the back, and they pushed right up and kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing. And so they took Man City as far away from their goal as was possible, whereas Newcastle invited them in all around their goal.
Absolutely.
And so I think Newcastle...
Oh, he's gone again.
I think we've lost him there. I mean, taking up what Malcolm's saying, I think he's absolutely right. I'm not saying that I want them to play 5 at the back. I'm saying I think they will play 5 at the back. I'd rather they went with a flat back 4, put more in midfield and didn't isolate whoever's playing centre forward, whether that's Gale or Joelinton, and it's going to be one or the other, or both, if Gale played behind Joelinton. But if there's a weakness at Man City, Steve, it's the 2 central defenders, isn't it? They're not tall, they're not big, they're not great in the air. Stones is playing tonight, and he may be able to look elegant on occasions, but he makes mistakes if he's hassled. Let us get in their face a little bit and see if we can find the weakness there and perhaps exploit it. Felt sorry for Andy Carroll in one of his rare starts when it happened against City, and he had to play the way he did play, because he didn't have a chance. But let's have a little go at them. They might have a weak underbelly at the centre of the defence. They've never replaced Company. It's probably the only weakness I've got. But let's have a little go.
Yeah. Prediction for tonight, John?
They'll get beat 3-1.
Yeah.
And I don't say that with any glee, but I do. What about yours, Steve? Because you sometimes go off on the left tangent and say something quite incredible, and then it comes off.
Definitely not tonight, man. And I can never get that with the bookies, by the way. No, I think you're right. I can see Newcastle coming a cropper tonight. I'll be very surprised if Man City are going to take it easy. I think they'll want to go out with a bang, if you like, and they've already done that with their result against Liverpool. I expect Newcastle to probably lose 3-0 tonight. I can see them getting a cuffing. And I think, John, looking ahead as well, we've got a tough run in, and I mean it's a good job we got those points in the bag when we did, because obviously with subsequent games coming up against Tottenham, of course, Liverpool as well at the last game of the season, it could have been squeaky bum time had we not got those points in the bag.
And the interesting thing, and I was just looking at some facts there, the interesting thing is that we also struggled, Steve, against the bottom teams. If you look this season, we have drawn at home to Villa, Brighton and Watford and lost at home to Norwich. Now think how bad those sides are. And we've still got to go to Watford this weekend and to Brighton. Both of whom got a point at Newcastle. Now, on the form, we have struggled more West Ham is an example of that at home as well. We've struggled against the sides at the bottom. So while we know Liverpool's going to be huge, while we know Manchester City is going to be huge, I don't think Watford and Brighton can be taken for granted that we're just going to turn them over. Will we get a result like we did against Bournemouth? Or will we get a result like we have? We've played Villa twice this season and haven't beaten them. We've played Norwich twice this season and haven't beaten them. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, just give us a quick prediction for the Watford game, John, because we'll not get you on till next week. So looking ahead.
I mean, I think I was generous to Newcastle tonight when I said they would score 1. I think you're right at 3-0 probably. But I would like to say that Newcastle must not and will not lose at Watford. I think they can win by 2-1. A draw wouldn't be the end of the world. They ought not to lose, because what's to come is that Brighton will be tricky. Spurs, merely because the Spurs will be awkward in Liverpool. It'll be like playing Man City again. But I think we can win 2-1 against Watford. But tonight is just a matter of sitting back and taking the punishment and gritting our teeth and saying, well, we've got Watford to come this weekend. Let's bring Almiron back in, let's bring Maximum back in, and let's have a real pop at them.
Great stuff, John, as always. Apologies to everybody who was expecting Malcolm on. He's obviously having some computer issues. It was nice to get him back in for a short while, but we will hope he clears those problems up for later on when we come back on post-match. John, great to have you on, mate, and look forward to speaking to you again next week. Have a good week.
Absolutely. I think Malcolm's actually in secret training because he fancies that centre-forward shirt for next season. 2 goals is the maximum we've had from a centre-forward. He, at his age, can still score 2 in a whole season. So you get training, Malcolm, my son. Lovely to speak to you. Fingers crossed tonight that it's not too bad. Let's go and do it on Saturday at Watford.
Pleasure as always. Take care, John, and good night to everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.